Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Mark Wormgoor. He is a founder of Terry and the Maverick CTO program, and he's dedicated to working with CTOs and tech leaders to set new standards in tech leadership. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Thank you. Thanks, and thanks for having me.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show, Mark. Welcome to India in this online form.
Thank
And
you.
I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll be talking about how to revolutionize one's tech leadership, especially for companies. And also we'll be talking about that. But before we talk about this, let's talk a bit about your journey so that people know who they are listening to, so that they can learn from your journey itself.
Sure. Mark, 49 years old. I live in the Netherlands, and I've been in tech most of my working life. It's been 28 years now, I think. I started way at the bottom, systems engineering, doing infrastructure, things like that. I moved on to consulting. And from there on, I moved into leadership positions. I've been the head of IT operations and security for JDE, Jacobs Douwe Egberts, a big international coffee and tea company. I've been interim head of operations for CRH, for example. It's really big in building and construction. And most recently this summer, I actually helped out someone I know closely. I was the interim CTO for Lipton Teas. Over the years, I think I've learned a lot about leadership. And leadership in technology, which is not the same as any other leadership function. And that's why I love talking about it. I think a lot of people in technology grow up. They know a lot about technology, whether that's programming, whether that's infrastructure, whether that's security, or whether that's applications. It's all very interesting, but at some point you'll reach a leadership level where you need to have all these additional skills, all the soft skills. You need to be a leader. You need to lead a team, set a culture, manage stakeholders, do hiring of new people. And I think that's where it becomes really interesting. And that's really where I am now, want to help people grow the soft skills as well.
Absolutely, Mark. Absolutely. So you want companies to, when you talk about tech leadership, and when you talk about, bold visionary tech leadership, what does you actually mean by that?
Okay, so what technology used to be, and I think in a lot of companies still is, it's a supporting function. So when somebody wants something from technology, they go to a CTO or a CIO, they ask a question and they say, I could use this. And then the CIO, the CTO comes in and actually fulfills that promise, or they ask what's delivered. I think that's no longer where the world is today. So for every company, technology has become a critical part of the company. Technology is everywhere with AI, but also before that, I think with the internet, with direct B2C commerce. Technology is an integral part of every single business today. And I think that hasn't necessarily landed with every company. So what it means for me is that where the CTO or the CIO used to be a service organization, when you ask them something, they fulfill. I think that actually needs to shift. So I think the CTO needs to start talking to all of their stakeholders on the board. They need to have board level discussions with sales, with supply chain, with delivery, with marketing, with finance, with HR, with all of their peers and explain what is possible in technology these days. I still see that a lot of leaders, CEOs, head of sales, marketing, finance, don't necessarily understand what's possible. I think that's the role for the CTO or the CIO today, to get on their little soapbox and actually explain all of this to all of their peers on the board. They should have a full board seat, explain that, and actually by doing that, you can take a company to the next level through technology. So not just focusing on sales per se, but actually integrating technology into the sales processes to revolutionize how organizations do sales. And that's just one example. I think the same should happen in all functions. So technology as an integral part of every single business function, driven by what's possible in technology, not by what's needed from each of the functions.
Right, Mark. Right. Now, if we look at the whole, area of using technology for businesses, haven't the CTOs been doing that? Means there have been so many years when automation was the buzzword, and now AI is the buzzword into businesses, how should then people look at it? Wasn't automation enough? And you see, so much of automation is there that the customer has been left behind. And now, with more AI coming in, bots coming in, means ultimately it comes down to the customer. Help us understand this. Means, do you think not enough automation was done? And do you think not enough technology is being introduced into businesses and systems?
I actually don't. And the reason why I think is exactly what you just said. There's a lot of technology available, whether it's in automation, whether it's in bot, whether it's in AI, and CTOs and people in technology, and I'm one of them, love the technology. They love the new shiny objects. They love looking at what's possible. ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, all the other LLMs. I think that's the fun part. I think the hard part is actually bringing that knowledge across to the other side of the organization, to all of the other functions, explaining what is possible and sitting together in their seat. So sitting down with the head of sales, explaining what is possible, listening to them, listening to their challenges, listening to what's holding them back from selling, and together figuring out how technology can play a role in optimizing and accelerating sales. I think the first part, CTOs are doing exceptionally well. They know the technology, they know what's possible, they know how it could be used. I think actually sitting down with everyone else on the board and having that discussion is where they could really step up.
Right, right, Mark. So let's talk about business growth. You talk about unlocking the full potential of tech for businesses to grow. What is this unlocking? Means how does one get started if it's a small business? Should they focus too much on technology or on the product or service? And even if it's a large firm, uh, how much should they look at introducing technology? By the time we are talking, haven't they already done it? What are the areas that could have been left either for small businesses or for large organizations? How do they get started with this?
So, and I think that's a very interesting question. What you see, and I see a lot of different organizations in the inside, both small and large. Let me start with the large because I like that.
Right.
Large organizations, there's a lot of organizations right now that are talking about AI is new, AI is the hype. Yes, I know it's been almost 2 years already since the hype started, but still, they're still talking and they're doing some small pilot projects as to seeing maybe they can introduce Copilot, or maybe they can introduce ChatGPT and slightly optimize the efficiency of their employees. You see other companies, and I love Walmart as an example, that have already deployed AI full scale as part of their core process. So what Walmart has done, and this was part of their Q2 earnings recently, they have this enormous product catalog, and they've actually used AI to rewrite a lot of their product descriptions and to figure out how they can use AI to support their customers in finding what they need on their website using AI. So they've actually already, in these last 2 years, made AI a fully integral part of their business. And I think they're probably the exception to the rule, because you have all these other organizations that are still in the early stages that are trying to figure out what is AI, what can we do with it, where should we put it to use. I think the big difference between the successful organizations and the ones that are lagging is speed. So having those discussions rapidly, at speed, and making big decisions to actually move on, try something out, do a pilot with new technology, and then implement it. I think that's the difference. Where a Walmart, and Walmart is probably one of the largest organizations on this planet, they're able to do that within a year. Some other organizations that are much smaller are still in the experimentation, in the pilot phases. And I think that's the big difference. Walmart makes this an integral part of their process. And I think that's what other companies should do a lot more as well.
Right, Mark. Let's look at the CTOs and the other tech people within the IT department or the company itself. Is that why is it that there has not been as much use of technology that you would want to? Is it because they are lazy? Is it because does it cost too much? Or is it because they do not have an idea about technology? Means CTOs not having an idea. I don't know. You will be able to understand.
Yeah. No, I think so. I think the last one is absolutely not the case. CTOs know their technology; they know it inside out. I I think the biggest challenge is what I said at the beginning. It's that they know what technology can do. It's just that they need to get that into the heads of everyone else on the organization. And I think CTOs by nature, and I can't say this too loud, but CTOs are often, they have IT backgrounds. They may be not the most extroverted people, and they don't always feel comfortable reaching out to everyone else on their board to have that discussion. This is what technology can do. These are all the new things out there, but also put themselves in the shoes of their counterparts. So understanding the sales process. How does the organization sell? How do we reach our customers? What is the sales funnel that we use? And from there, see how you can optimize that using technology. So I think that's the hardest part, sitting down with the other functions and having that discussion. A head of sales has one objective. His objective is to actually grow the sales of the company, and he's going to do that with what he knows best. So he goes to his own experience or her own experience, to what they've learned in the past, and they will try to apply that in the situation today. Technology is not something that is top of mind for them, and it's not the first thing that they are going to think of when they see, how can I optimize my sales? And I think that's the role that the CTO needs to play. Sit down, help them understand how technology can play an even bigger role in driving the sales. And that's just sales. Of course, the same applies to all the other functions in the organization.
Right, Mark. So if we are talking about technology in today's time, as a simple person, layman, I understand a lot of this technology nowadays is what is based on AI. Either it is one sort of AI or something belonging to another. Is that technology that we are talking about, or is it some other kind of technology? Because if we are just basing everything of our what we are doing on only chat GPT or the like things, then isn't it too much banking on something, and that people are pragmatically looking at the whole practical aspect of everything? Help us understand that. Is there an existence of any other kind of technology, or we have already utilized that technology for automation and AI is the only thing left for the future?
I think there's a lot of different examples of things that can work. I don't think it's just AI. And then let me explain how big organizations work a little bit. So when organizations at some point, they have a problem and they need to solve that. So for example, they have a need for a CRM system. They make a decision. They go and buy, let's say, Salesforce, for example. They implement Salesforce. The project is done, and that's where it stops. And I think that's one of the main challenges is once you have a big project and it's run like a big project, it stops, and that's the new status quo, and that's where they stop. There's not a continuous evolution of how do we take the next step? How do we make it even bigger? How do we reach more customers? How do we improve our marketing, our communication with our customers? It's just you're stuck at the status quo. And I think that's one of the challenges. I think if we talk about AI, I think there's too much focus on just these large language models, ChatGPT, Copilot. I think, yes, it's been a big hype. I think we're still trying to figure out, a lot of organizations, how to make it work, because ChatGPT is nice, but it's not going to replace, in most organizations, 100 employees or 200 employees. It's going to make them slightly more efficient, but it's not going to change night and day. There's a lot of other solutions that are out there that are far more interesting, I think. One example is I was at a factory recently, a couple of months ago, and they've implemented a very nice AI tool for vision recognition. And they're actually, once the product is manufactured, they have a small camera there, and it actually detects if the product is done right or if there's a defect. And if there's a defect, it's going to immediately reject it. So what used to be a person that was checking every single manufactured item in person, they've replaced with a very simple camera and an AI system behind it to check the quality. It's a very small change. It's on a production line. It's hidden in a factory somewhere. Not a lot of people see it, but it's an enormous change. The speed that an AI vision model can actually detect defects there is so much greater than a human can do it. And it's probably not the most interesting job out there anyway in a factory to inspect every item for defects. I've seen this in this factory. I've also heard the same thing for wood, for example. There's a company that builds the same kind of recognition system for inspecting wood boards before they get sawed. It has to be extreme speed because these wood boards are extremely long. They need to scan how they need to be sawed. It can do this at real-time processing. So, and these are some simple examples that in factories, manufacturing, can make a huge difference between what was a manual process and can now suddenly, because of AI, be fully automated.
Right, Mark. Right. So, if a CTO is listening to you right now and he realizes, oh, I didn't do the right work, I should now catch up. A lot has already happened, and he wants to catch up with all the technological advances that has taken. What should he do? Means should he just go and implement thing randomly, or is there a process to it that he can do?
My process, what I use or what I always recommend to CTOs, I think first sit down with, you need to understand what's out there in the market, right? So you need to have an understanding of the available technology. I think most CTOs read the news, they read the tech news, they know what's available, they know what's possible out there in the market. I think the first step that they should do is just spend a session, a couple of hours with each of their counterparts. So let's take finance, for example. I'd like them to sit down with their head of finance, their CFO, and maybe they have a controller or a treasury department or some other leads below that. Sit down for 2 hours and just explain to them what is possible with technology today. From there, have a brainstorming session. So together brainstorm what technology could actually make change in our current company. So we have these finance processes, invoicing, payments, treasury. How could we use technology to make improvements in our processes, to actually make a radical improvement? I think from there, decide on the top 3 and do a small pilot. So I'm not a big fan of doing large-scale rollouts immediately. Start a small pilot, see, we have this idea that if we do this project in treasury, let's take treasury as an example, if we do this project there, then we could make a change. Let's design a small pilot. How can we prove that it will actually work in 4 weeks, 8 weeks time with a very small investment? If we can actually prove that it works, from there we can decide to scale up. We can create a business case. What does it cost to implement? How much time or money is it going to save us? And from there implement. But brainstorm, come up together with each of the business teams with some ideas of things you could do, and design small pilots to see if that could actually work. And from there, scale up.
Right, Mark. Now, today is the time, a lot of people talking about everything fractional CMOs, fractional CTO you talked about.
Yeah.
In these times, when you already say a lot of people are lagging behind in terms of implementing technology within their organizations, how does this, part-time CTOs or anything work for organizations, especially when a lot of people are already talking about, outsourcing this whole IT department itself. And here you are talking about that making the IT department as the growth driver within the organization. What's your advice on this understanding? What would you like to tell organizations on this?
So first of all, I believe, like you said, that technology for a lot of organizations is part of their core business, and potentially a big growth driver for their future. So that's my belief. And from there on, I don't think it's wise. I mean, yes, you can outsource bits and pieces of that. I don't think it is smart to outsource the leadership, the tech leadership of a company. So if you're a small company and a startup, I understand if you're a 3 people startup, a fractional CTO may be a good idea. I think if you're a larger company, let's say 10 plus, I think it really makes sense to have someone in your team, either on your board or somewhere close to it, that really understands technology and they can really help drive that growth. Yes, that person may not have all the knowledge themselves. So maybe let's say if we talk about AI or large language models, they need to bring somebody in from the outside to help them on a very specific topic. I mean, this person can't also be an expert on Salesforce, for example. So if there's something to be said around Salesforce, they'll need to bring in an expert. But I do believe strongly that tech leadership should always be in-house. I think that's first. Second, when it comes to outsourcing, I think if you have very specific niches, it makes sense to bring an expert in, like we talked about Salesforce. I'm not the greatest believer in outsourcing. I think if you want to build a global international team, I think, first of all, there's a lot of tools out there today that let you do that yourself. I do a lot of work with India at the moment as well. And I see a lot of organizations have their own, they no longer rely on the big IT players in India. they actually have a local office in Bangalore or some of the other cities in India. So I see a lot of organizations building their own teams there already, and I think that's probably the better way to go for two reasons. One, you don't have to pay the outsourcer for their 20, 30, 40% markup, so it saves you money. Two, you have a lot more control over the actual people that you hire and you bring into your team. So I think long-term, building bigger teams offshore in India or any of the other countries, I personally believe it makes more sense to do that yourself instead of relying on someone else.
Right, right, Mark. Now, as a top person who understands technology, who tells others about technology, a lot of businesses would want to understand the future trend. How do you think about technology, say 2 years going down, down the line, and be prepared for it? Secondly, if you see that cloud strike thing, if I'm remembering thing,
Yeah.
if such a thing happens, what do they do? Should they close their business, wait for the systems to be up? It can be beyond a few hours, and so help us understand about how should they look at technology going to come in the future. What's your understanding? And events like this, how should they be prepared for this?
So first of all, I think being prepared for what's going to happen 2 years down the line, I think is difficult, if not impossible. I think if you would have asked a lot of CTOs 2.5, 3 years ago, what's going to be the biggest trend 2 years from now, very few would have said AI. So I think a lot of these things hit all of us by surprise. And even in AI today, I personally find it very difficult to predict what's going to happen end of this year. I read all of the news and the rumors about the new OpenAI models that are going to come out. But even then, the rest of this year is a big rumor. What's going to happen next year, nobody knows. And 2026 is really, really far away. I think what's key is to be agile. So make sure that you have a team and an organization that you're ready to keep up with all of these big changes. The speed of development isn't going to go down. I think it's going to accelerate further. So I think that's the critical part, is that, technological development is accelerating, and that's not going to stop. I think over the last 40, 50, 60 years, we've seen this exponential trend in technological development that's going to continue. So I think the only way to be ready is to have a capable team. Don't sign 5-year outsourcing agreements, because nobody knows what the future looks like in 5 years, and have a team that's agile and it's able to move very quickly based on the new things that are happening. So I think that's first. And the second one, I think CrowdStrike, and CrowdStrike is an example, but there's other examples in ransomware attacks. I think the reality is you can't stop this from happening. I think we've all learned from CrowdStrike. I think Microsoft, CrowdStrike, and a lot of the security providers are making changes to make sure this isn't going to happen again. Something else will happen at some point in the future. And I think big outages are not going to go away. I'd love if they would, but that's not going to happen. I mean, there is still a thing such as business continuity. So how do we continue our business if everything goes down? And every business I work with, I do try to stress that, is to make sure that if everything goes down, if our network goes down, our core ERP goes down, our core systems go down, what are you going to do? I mean, make sure that you have at least a pen and paper process that you can continue for a day, maybe 2 days, and have that in place and test that. I'd hope that it doesn't happen again, but it's almost certain that it will.
Absolutely. Be that as it may, let's understand about your Maverick CTO program. Tell us a bit about that.
So I started this earlier this year. Why? First of all, I love coaching and mentoring people. I've been doing that for about 4 years now. I did my coaching training. And then I thought I can just coach people, but really what I want to give them is a mindset of, as a CTO, how do you make the biggest impact you can in your position? And that's why I started the Maverick CTO. Maverick CTO has some core values. And I think the biggest one of those is bold, visionary leadership. So I think instead of as a CTO acting as a internal service provider, as a internal IT shop, I think it's critical that you have that bold and visionary vision for where the organization can go, where it can grow, and just share that with everyone else in the organization. I think make IT, make tech the growth driver for an organization, and don't just sit by and wait for the next orders to come in. I think that's probably the biggest one. And that's why I started this. I really want to help CTOs make that change, lead the pack instead of just waiting around and sitting.
Absolutely. And there is so much to learn from you, and a lot of people would like to know more about you, about the program, and would like to be associated with you. So what's the best way for them to do so?
So what I've developed as part of the Maverick CTO is a CTO compass. It's actually, well, I think that the top 5 to 10% of what I've learned over the years, my knowledge. I think if people connect to me on LinkedIn or Instagram, Mark Wormgoor, you will find me. Send me a message, compass. I'll be happy to share that. I think that's first, it's free. So don't hesitate to ask for that. I love sharing that. And I think from there, if you have an interest in coaching yourself, maverickcto.com is a great website where you can get started and reach out to me.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.